Know how to start. Good evening. Welcome to tonight's council meeting. I apologize for the late start. I'm going to blame that on our city attorney tonight, just because.
Why not?
I'd like to call the meeting to order. First thing I'm going to ask for is agenda changes.
Mr. Mayor, no changes to present this evening.
Okay. Next, I'll open up for public forum. If anybody's here wishing to address the council that's not on the agenda, now's the time to come forward. Seeing no movement from the gallery, I'm going to close the public forum and move on and ask for the approval of the consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor, after reviewing the consent agenda as submitted, I would make a motion to approve it.
Before we do that, Brad, are there any big changes on the STR?
No, this year actually, in terms of the last 7 or 8, it has the fewest changes to them. Most of them were liberalizing a couple of elements of driving while suspended, that sort of thing, but nothing material in terms of what we would typically enforce.
Good. Good. We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Consent agenda stands as approved. We got one item under unfinished business, and that's code enforcement ordinances update. I would assume, Brad, you want to?
Yeah, we had gone through 1330, which now will need to be, I guess, start with 1331, 1332, whatever. And those are numbered in the fashion they would have been last time. The first one we've been through, and I went through that with the health nuisances generally in Article 2. The other three, 2A, 3, and 4, all required relative amounts of changes to them in order to go ahead and do the same thing that we did in principle in just the general health nuisance sections, which is to remove the appeal, if you will, or at least the review by the governing body, and replace that with the municipal court, utilizing the police department as our public officer, the flexibility for the city manager to select should this become such a massive undertaking that the law enforcement didn't feel that they could do it any longer. He has the ability at any time to designate a different public officer for environmental control types of issues who would have the same duties and obligations along with same rights in terms of writing tickets, that kind of thing. And as I'd indicated last time, so I won't rehearse that whole thing again, basically there's no longer any requirement that 2 citizens have to sign any form of a complaint. This is simply observation by law enforcement or a report to law enforcement. They would treat it the same way they do any other types of offenses that they deal with. Go and establish probable cause independent of the report that they were given if they weren't the ones observing it. Then we still give the same amount of time for people to remediate. If they choose not to do that, then a citation is written. It goes to district court, and the review process that otherwise had been done by the governing body, which slowed this process down by what amounts to about 60 days, would be done by the court. The element at the end of that, in terms of if we go ahead and exercise public assistance and remediate the situation, whether that's hauling off a junk vehicle, mowing, which is one of our more common ones, cleaning up a yard that's just completely beyond control, whatever it may be, all of those various costs still follow the same process in terms of notice to the property owner, or if they have an agent, whoever it may be. And then we follow that, and annually in August, basically, Julie has the ability to go ahead and place those on the tax rolls for purposes of a lien against that real estate. So none of that changes. The only thing in a general sense that we've taken out of this is that additional step requiring the governing body to get involved, get completely educated on the process, and then have to rule on something that really isn't within the general duties of the office that you hold. So we took that part out of it and tried to expedite the process a bit with the procedure that we now are following.
Well, 1333 is a lot thinner than 1330.
Again, depending on which one it is, even the definitional sections you'll see are very short.
Sure.
And it depends on what it is that we're dealing with, because it's thinner in the code as it currently exists as well.
Right.
So what we did when we added 2A, we took a bunch of the things that would have been in those other sections and put it in there because it was more logical. Depending on what the nuisance is, we have a defined category for junk vehicles. We have a defined category for weeds. And then we have just environmental nuisances in a general sense. And then we have those that are the catch-all for junk, trash, old furniture, whatever types of things that refuse you may pile up in a yard that someone decides to leave there until it becomes a nuisance in and of itself. Then we go forward on that. So those are the 4 articles that we had to deal with.
Well, we've got some reading. If there is no other questions, Mr. Mayor, I would motion to table further consideration of this draft until September 11th.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to table this matter until September 11th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That will stay tabled until September 11th. Well, that takes care of our unfinished business. We'll move into new business, and the first item under new business is the Brick Streets Arts and Crafts Festival, and I believe we have representation here tonight. And they're drawing to see who gets the short straw, looks like.
It's always me. Thank you, members of the council, Mr. Mayor, for allowing us to talk. I'm Amy Beck, this is Mary Wilson, we're part of the Brick Street Committee. Coming to you just with our progress at this point and our list of requests. We are holding Brick Street on October 14th? Yes, second Saturday. The event itself is running from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. We typically close the street or ask to close the street at 6 a.m. We have vendors that come in starting at 6 to start setting up. So I was hoping maybe we could get the barricades set up just maybe 5:45-ish, just to give us that little bit of a cushion in case the vendors show up early. We would also just ask for the barricades and traffic control detour signs like we have in the past. As far as our space, we've typically just used that, the 200 block of Main. We're ahead of the game so far on vendors this year. We're already at about 30, and that's what we had last year. And if even a quarter of the people who I've sent applications out to respond, it's gonna be a lot bigger this year, which is a good thing, but we need more space. Or we may need more space. I know you and I had kind of chatted about it last week or so. I'm kind of going all over the place, but it all kind of ties in together. The chili cook-off is coming back this year. I spoke with Jordan at Champs Meats. He is going to head up the chili cook-off. It's going to be their thing. They're going to do it. We had hoped to actually have the chili cook-off take place in the area between the market and Troy's, and I spoke to Russ and Troy about using that area. They're not in complete agreement yet. I'm going to keep working on that to possibly use that space, which would also involve closing 2nd Street going across. We're looking at the potential of, we already close off 3rd Street. We're looking at the potential of maybe moving vendors down more towards the 309 building. I know we can't block off the post office, so we would not go any farther than that. And then maybe going down 3rd Street each way, obviously not blocking the alleys. But, I mean, that area is already blocked off anyway, so we may kind of inch in that direction. Once we get closer to the deadline, which is October 1st for our vendors, and I have a more firm count, then we may need to make adjustments to that plan. So I'm
Because
just.
last year, didn't we have right at 30 last year?
Yes, we were right at 30 last year, and here it is the end of August, and we're already at 30.
30 already.
So we have room within that space to put more vendors, because I've typically spread them out a little bit, but I also don't want them to be smashed in. So I'm gonna look at ways to make everybody fit, but I just wanna kind of leave that opening that we may need more space when the time comes.
Ethan, would it be easier for us to give the street closure she's wanting tonight with the potential of amending in the future, or just wait until she has a final count before we actually do the street closures?
You can either at least approve the main closure that's always been done as far as the 200 block and the third and main intersection, and then you can make the rest subject to staff review or ask that they come back when they have firm information for the extension either way. I mean, I don't think going south, we shouldn't run into any issues because most of those businesses don't have
Like I said, hold
Saturday.
it short of the post office.
Right.
And if we have to shoot west, hold it short of fire department.
Right,
Right,
right.
without
We
the
wouldn't go beyond the
alleys.
alleys.
Beyond the alleys.
And the goal was, since Champs is doing the chili cook-off, they wanted to have it kind of right there in, in their area. But I understand that puts a burden on the market and the hardware store, so I want to make sure that those businesses are okay with it. And he said, I kind of ran it past them, but
Do you have an alternate plan if they decide not to cooperate on that?
oh, there's always an alternate plan.
Okay.
We talked about just holding it on the sidewalk too.
Or, well, I mean, we've typically had the food vendors up there kind of between Jumpstart and the chiropractor. We can move the chili cook-off to that area, have the vendors going down Main Street and have the chili cook-off. I mean, it wouldn't be real convenient, but maybe have it at the south end or on the side street. We'll figure it out.
Is this probably gonna be our first event that we're gonna be able to use that form that you
That's
had?
what I was gonna ask.
We hadn't given it to them yet since that just got adopted and they were
Okay,
already in discussions, but we can.
There's a
yeah,
phone.
There's a form.
yes, there's a form.
So
So maybe,
Clarify a lot of this.
yes.
Did this, didn't you?
So do we have enough time right before this event?
yeah,
So maybe we let them see the form, consider that. And I mean, it all looks real positive, but this is gonna be a new process that
Right.
we need to make sure that we comply with at all events.
Right.
I thought we wanted to leave Main and Third Street open for emergency vehicles to respond.
We've always had Third closed off, and they've gone out the other direction.
They've gone
Get
to
out
the
on
west.
Chestnut and go down to Sixth or up to First Street.
Yeah, we've always had Third closed off. Well, okay, as far as I know, we've always had Third closed off.
I don't foresee a real issue, but I think we need to get that form in their hands and let them do their due diligence on
Yeah.
that.
Okay,
We've instituted this form and we need to get it started more sooner than
We're the
later.
first ones.
Yeah, it gives me great pleasure to let you guys know you'll be the first ones utilizing it. I'm sure we'll get some feedback.
I'm sure. So, but like I said, we don't, not knowing exactly how many vendors we're gonna have yet. I just
We
wanted
have-
to kind of throw it out there that we may need more space.
It's just a matter, we have sent out the applications, they have not turned them back in. We could double it. It's just, they have not turned the applications with a payment
When
in.
is your deadline
October 1st,
to accept applications?
yeah.
I have a month.
So we have plenty of time. So do we want to table this issue until at least minimum next meeting?
Or we can give them their standard street closures now and modify it later,
I think
or,
I think we table it, make sure the form's done.
okay.
I'd feel better about that also.
Okay. Just
We-
for,
we've
just for the
developed it.
space issue,
Yes.
because I'm not done with my list yet.
And permission from
The other businesses, yeah.
Okay,
But generally, I don't see there's gonna be an issue, but we gotta make sure, we've got this form in place now, we gotta do that procedure. So-
right, right,
yeah, you can.
okay.
So, well, with
So-
that, Mr. Mayor,
Well-
did you have more? I'm sorry.
There's
Oh, we're
more.
not done yet.
We're not
That
done
was the
yet.
first thing.
Okay, okay.
And then wherever we end up with our closings, just have the barricades, detour signs, things like that. And then we would ask that you provide the porta pots and hand washing stations like you have done in the past. The picnic tables. I know that's Pat's favorite part. Picnic tables, and if possible, a pallet of sandbags for the vendors that We tell them it's a brick street, you cannot stake down your tents, and it never fails. Somebody comes and says, oh, I don't have anything to hold my tent down.
And we have 40-mile-an-hour winds that day.
So if we could get some sandbags also, that would be wonderful. Like I said, the chili cook-off is happening. Champs is gonna take care of that. We have been working on getting some entertainment in. There is a group from Pratt Community College that may come and perform. They perform to raise money to go on a trip to Tennessee every year. And then I know we had also talked about the possibility of some other musical entertainment. So that's kind of where we are at this point as far as our planning. And any help that the city can provide would be greatly appreciated.
Sounds good.
I didn't hear anything unreasonable. We'll get that form filled out and see where we go. Well, if that's it,
I believe that is it.
with that, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to table this issue until our next council meeting.
We have a motion and a second to table the street closures and items for brick streets until the next council meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you guys for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
We'll get it worked out.
Oh, yeah. That's why we wanted to come in early this year, so that we could throw an engine out.
Next, under new business, is the Halstead Community Foundation special event.
Hello, thank you for letting me come tonight. My name is Marcy Carr, and I am the chair of the Halstead Community Foundation. And we have a unique opportunity this season. The Patterson Family Foundation is offering a $70,000 match grant to rural foundations that can raise those funds in order to promote rural communities. And our kickoff event for that, we are proposing or planning a Brick Street After Hours, which will occur after the Arts and Crafts Festival. So our hours would run from 5 to 10. We thought it was a great opportunity for something that was already bringing people into the community to go ahead and layer on top of that. And since hopefully the streets will already be closed and porta potties and tables already out, we can just take advantage of that setup without having to do that at a later date and cost, just keep that cost down. So we're looking to streamline that event. Our goal is to encourage community nonprofits and group and businesses to come and have a block party feel while promoting their organizations as well. So we would kind of be the host that would be organizing all of that. We already have interest from the Historical Society and PEO groups that are willing to come and have a booth at that. Selling desserts. We're in talks with Mayor Travis providing a little DJ work for us that night. And so I know we've got some people interested in maybe a cornhole tournament, but really just kind of having a fall block party. Also during that night, we would announce our grant awardees. Those have already been done, and we normally do that at Old Settlers. But we felt like pushing it back maybe into the fall would be maybe just a little more enjoyable after a busy weekend of Old Settlers. It's kind of hard sometimes to fit all of those things in. So that's kind of the event in a nutshell of what we're doing. We just got all of our paperwork approved by CKCF today, and so we'll be pushing that out to our fund advisors and local nonprofits and people that are interested in coming. So
By local nonprofits, how far out are you going with that? The reason I ask, there's some other nonprofit organizations I work with that may be interested in your event.
yeah, I mean, I feel like the more the merrier.
Newton Valley Center, would those be welcome?
Yeah, I mean, we hadn't really talked about that. We were focusing kind of on that first layer of, but if like Harvey County United Way wanted to come in and they wanted to set up, I mean, we have a lot of partnerships with a lot of area. So, I would bring that back to the board and see what their thoughts were. But, I just think anytime you can bring people together that have passions about the work that they do, I think that's really advantageous. So I'd love to visit with you more about that and see what that looks like.
This Patterson grant, is that what you?
Yes,
referred to? Is there a time frame within which you have to raise that 70,000?
Yes, we set our kickoff date on October 14th, and then it's running through November 28th, which is Giving Tuesday. So gives us about 6 weeks to try and raise that money.
70K in 6 weeks, that sounds kind of tough.
Let's give it a shot, huh?
Yeah, we're gonna give it a shot. Yeah, we, one of the things that we're, that we've done in the last couple of months is we've started a, community, improvement fund. And so, proceeds from that night will be also into that for, assisting Tessa Windling and her group with the downtown beautification project.
You'll be
And
able to count that as a portion?
Yes,
Very good.
absolutely.
Very good.
Yeah, so people can, and we will be sending out mailers and having a Facebook campaign that people can give online if they want to. They can give through a mailer, and they'll get to choose the fund or the project that they are wanting to devote their money to.
Well, we have a couple of motions here. The first one would to be provide the trash carts and portable toilets. So, Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion to approve provision of trash carts, portable toilets, and street closure as requested.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to provide for street closures and the portable toilets and everything for the Halstead Community Foundation Brick Streets After Festival. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
I do have one more ask if I could. We are looking for local businesses to sponsor, and I'd like to see if the city would consider being a gold sponsor for the event, which is a $250 donation to the event.
Ethan, you know what we have on the table as far as funds allocated. I would actually like to see a little bit more than the 250.
I have this.
But considering what we have out there, what would you feel comfortable? I don't mean to put, I'm really putting you on the spot, but I'm sorry.
I mean, I defer, for transparency, I'm on the community foundation
Oh, okay.
board. So I guess I can very much say, like, I think you all are pretty aware of kind of our normal sponsorships of community events and the dollar range that runs, and any of those would fall. I mean, within the realm of,
I'm thinking if you're 250 gold, if you double that, you should be platinum.
I'm
right?
thinking.
I can arrange
I'm
that.
thinking about 8,000.
I'll just do 1,000.
Does anybody else have thoughts on that? Personally, I'm good with 1,000.
I think we've done more for Old Settlers and other groups in the past, so
Yeah.
1,000 feels good.
Yep.
Super platinum.
Super. Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion to approve sponsorship of the event by the city of Halstead for an amount not to exceed $1,000.
Second.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're
Have a
very excited
motion
about the
and a
event.
Second to sponsor the Halstead Community Foundation's event with $1,000 sponsorship. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. There you go. Any other
Perfect.
questions?
No, I think I'll get the form on my way out.
All right.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your support.
I'll get your contact information from Ethan, and
Perfect.
I'll let you know those couple other
Sure.
nonprofits I had in mind.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much.
You bet. Next up under new business is the Pathways Grant. We got a resolution for that tonight, but first you want to explain to us a little bit about that grant, Ethan?
yeah, so there was a copy of the resolution in your packet. We did a handout, following up with the pathways. They wanted some exhibits. One exhibit was just a budget, which, breaks down that 110 that's in the resolution, and the other one, which we printed out, was the map, so you guys can see. The Pathways Grant, the city approved the pledge back in January, of 2023. At that time, didn't really quite know the full extent that the Healthy Harvey Coalition would be able to have regarding, or what the potential upper limits. That since has been established to be 85,000. Talking with them, the Pathways Grant is meant to, increase multimodal transportation, and try and appeal or serve underserved populations. So as we were looking, one of the things that came up even during our Safe Routes to Schools audit is on the south side of 6th Street, there is no sidewalk going west of Cedar Drive. So basically, Homestead, Assisted Living of Halstead and the Halstead Housing Authority either have to cross Sixth Street, and there's no marked intersections there to do crossing, to get, or just basically walk either in the street or along. So the thought was to build a 5-foot sidewalk. You can see there kind of from the midpoint of the housing authority. The housing authority does have sidewalk within their structures. We have talked to the housing authority. They're amenable to looking at if we needed any sort of easement granting or that. They're pretty excited about having sidewalks that would connect them into the larger city sidewalk network. Talking with Lochner on the project, they felt this was probably better bang for the buck than trying to figure out a crosswalk, at Sixth Street if you wanted to get into safety, because one, we're gonna build and improve the sidewalk crossings as you go further east along Sixth Street as it gets closer to the school. And then just the observed pedestrian audits, you didn't have a ton of pedestrian traffic up here that would justify maybe a crosswalk if you're also trying to think about keeping Sixth Street somewhat moving for traffic. So working with them, the estimated project cost is $110,000. 85,000 of that would be that Pathways grant, and then the other 25,000 would be the city. Kind of looking at it, that 25,000 is mostly going to be probably all of our preliminary costs, like engineering, survey, to make sure we're operating within the right of way. We should have plenty. Sixth Street's pretty wide. So we don't think we're gonna run into any easement or utility location issues, but this would get that done. And the goal, speaking with Lochner and letting them also help managing, is kind of having all that work done at the same time Safe Routes to School would be built. So,
Are these all gonna be ADA accessible?
yeah, we'll talk a little bit because like with the driveway entrances, there's not, it's still best practice to put, the truncated domes to allow, but they don't necessarily have that hard requirement because it's not a street. But we definitely would have ADA ramps and put an ADA ramp on the east side of Sixth and Cedar Drive, because that's the only actual street crossing. But we would look to make sure that all those driveways were appropriately marked and accessible. And then, yeah, it would be 5-foot sidewalk, so it'd actually be a foot wider than the sidewalk that currently is on the east of Cedar Drive. That's only 4 foot, I believe. that
So I
runs
have
in front of
I
the
have a
school.
couple of questions.
Sure.
We're remarking Sixth Street still, right? At some point?
Yeah,
So I don't know if that affects anything, but also, there's no children that live over here. Is there a better place that we could potentially use this?
I think we have a lot of residents that live in the low-income in the housing authority there that walking is their.
Well, I was just
transportation.
thinking Safe Routes to School, tying that in,
I think it's still a community project, though.
yeah. The reason the Pathways is specifically going towards this is Pathways is more meant to serve the vulnerable populations, which would be senior citizens, low income. It's complementing the SRTS project, but isn't a part of the formal SRTS where that is more of where are children crossing, how are they getting to school pathway. And that was kind of one of the big differences when we looked, like we thought about, could we use it for Main Street sidewalk improvements? And it was a harder sell to get that we were specifically helping, a population in need.
Okay.
And that right there, that right there sold me, the population in need. So,
Are we able to, because I know if you go further down on Sixth Street, like towards the schools, a bunch of those aren't ADA accessible. Are we able to do any improvements to some of those crossings as part of this?
We kind of tried to keep the scope in with what the Healthy Harvey Coalition had. I think that is either subsequent rounds of SRTS or, if there's more Pathways funding available, being able to look, this was kind of scoped and we're trying to get it where it was a comfortable match that I felt the city could do without delaying any other capital projects for us, but then also fully maximize what would be available from Healthy Harvey and the Pathways grant.
is this an annual grant?
I believe Blue Cross Blue Shield is the parent, and they do it, but I don't know how often, like, the Healthy Harvey Coalition applies for those funds. I think they're, like, this is kind of in the aspect, and I could get Lori here to tell you guys more, that they're pushing out kind of the final, they've done several projects like the Learning Center, and some various other projects in Newton and stuff with Pathways money. And this is just kind of one of their final pushes to expend the rest of those pathway funds out.
Now, just so you guys know, the SRTS program that we're part of, that's not a static program. It's gonna continue to be dynamic for many years. We'll have several phases that come in, and unless the DOT quits giving those grants away. But as long as those grants are available, we're gonna keep pursuing those.
Well, with that, Mr. Mayor, if there are no more questions or discussion, I would make a motion to approve resolution number 2023-12, resolution declaring the eligibility of the city of Halstead to submit an implementation grant application to Pathways to Healthy Kansas, a Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas grant program.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve resolution 2023-12. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That resolution stands as approved. Next item on the agenda under new business is we need to set a hearing date for the revenue neutral rate and budget public hearings. I'm sure Ethan has an idea when he'd like to do that.
Yeah, we are setting that tentatively for September 11th. We get our publication this week that gives us the observed state timeline between publication of that notice publicly and the hearing date itself of 10 days. I know everyone got notices of our proposed mill levy rate at 75.5. As we discussed in our last budget section, we went back through, made some cuts, so we're now proposing a mill levy rate of 74.815, which is a decrease from the 2023 mill rate of about 0.6 of a mill. So, but this, you have the notice that would go out in the Harvey County now, that just informs the public of that September 11th revenue neutral rate hearing and the budget public hearing that takes place after the revenue neutral rate public hearing.
With that, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to set a public hearing for the proposed 2023 budget for the city of Halstead on Monday, September 11th, 2023 at 7 p.m. and authorize publication of required public notices for the revenue neutral rate and budget public hearing, as well as proposed 2024 budget summary.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to have our budget public hearing and revenue neutral rate hearing September 11th, 2023. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those same sign. That motion carries, and that will be said at that meeting. That meeting's getting busy already. Next item under new business is common consumption area. I'll let Ethan bring us up to par with what we're talking about here.
Thank you. Brett had a handout this evening of just an example ordinance, and I'll let him turn it over because he can probably explain it better because he's dealt with it a little more. But a common consumption area has been talked about, and one of the suggested things, like with the Brick Streets after hours event, is be like typically state law, prohibits open carrying of alcohol or cereal or malt beverages. With the pandemic, then a little bit before that, they established common consumption, which is the city basically defines an area or approves that, and this doesn't, it doesn't become a free-for-all like BYOB. They're still permitting that kind of thing, but it would make it easier, if you will, like if there is some sort of event on Main Street, that if you had sellers, you have that kind of probably what everyone's been familiar with at a public event, where you have like a beer garden and there's a roped area and you have to stay in that roped area. You can't. This essentially would allow patrons to maybe walk all of downtown Halstead and not be in violation of state law, assuming the proper permitting had been gone through. There are rules like, say, Peppers is participating in the common consumption, they have to like put the alcohol in an identifiable cup from their establishment. They can't, there's actually prohibition in almost all the draft ordinances in other cities that we've looked at, that prohibits like the carrying of glass containers, that kind of thing. So there's still ways to allow for alcohol consumption at public events, or on public property, but this is one suggested way to maybe loosen it up for special events downtown where they would want that freedom. And I guess I'll turn over to Brad for any thoughts he has on common consumption and the advantages or disadvantages of that compared to other methods to allow for public property consumption.
Yeah, the common consumption areas, typically most cities have some form of temporary permitting that they use on an annualized basis for different groups requesting a beer garden, certain types of events where people can consume. Our general requirement is a prohibition on that type of consumption, and particularly as it relates to alcohol versus cereal malt, which we generally and directly control. The state deals with alcohol. What this does is provides a bridge. I think unless they've changed the fee, and I didn't check that beforehand today, it was $100 annually that the city pays to basically step into the shoes of the state, is one way to put it. It's probably overly simplified, but that's in essence what it is. People come to us then in instances where they intend to have an event within these defined areas. I tried, at the request of one city, to simply say the jurisdictional limits of the city. They frowned upon that. That's insufficient. So we defined, for example, one city has a public park. It's in the center of town. It's kind of one of those old style traditional, okay, they do everything there. So they made that a common consumption area so that the city could control it. As Ethan was saying, it's still permitted. We don't have people just, going and saying, okay, anytime, any day, any night, whatever, I can do this. No, you still have to come to the city, but it expedites that process somewhat. It allows us a bit more oversight and more control. Ethan was mentioning things that a lot of cities have that they actually put into their ordinance. We streamlined it after a number of experiences with this to where it's just this short form of ordinance. But in section 9, I believe is where I put it, we have a provision for rules and regulations that we create. We can do that by resolution, and we maintain those because they can be fluid. There are things that you experience sometimes that you never thought would be a problem, so you want to regulate it in the future, or things that are overly regulated. So it allows you to change all those without always republishing your ordinance. So I've done it that way in this instance, which is why those are not in here now, but I've got example sets of those with some types of changes. The one thing that's in this one, this is kind of the standard form I use. I did not change city administrator to city manager. That needs to change in this one. And all of the lines on this that are blank are for the areas that we define. If we had a community center, if we have, like I said, certain public parks, if you have certain areas, if we had a rodeo grounds, whatever it may be, those are the typical ones that are usually designated as areas. As Ethan was saying, you can go ahead and define your downtown area for certain types of events from such and such a street to such and such a street going one direction and then the other way, so that you develop a triangle or whatever it may be, or a rectangle, whatever you're wanting to use as a common consumption area as defined. And then we set up our own application process, and they do not have to go through the state then. We are designated, we step into the state's shoes for the purposes of allowing that licensure to occur within our city limits.
As you stated that every event has to be permitted, and as you had mentioned that one community designated that little park, does this restrict us to only having a specific area? Like say we have downtown designated as such, between such block, but as you mentioned, a rodeo comes to town, they want to be down. Can we designate an alternate space? Does this give us that ability to do that?
No, typically on a one-time basis, we're going to go back to the old approach.
Okay.
This is for the common consumption areas where we generally are going to see this with regularity, and it's something that we, like, if we decided to have a whole lot of summer baseball tournaments, more than we do now, and you wanted to be able to serve and consume at the baseball games, some softball tournament, whatever it may be, then we can designate that part of the park. For that purpose, we can take Riverside Park and designate it as a common consumption area. But we do have to establish a named area so that in the event the state came in just to audit us, they would be able, if we said it's Riverside Park, they would be able to go to Riverside Park and know, okay, within the general parameters of that area, as you define it locally, that's what you're granting permission to allow that type of activity on.
Do we have to revisit this ordinance annually as a housekeeping matter?
No. Once we have it in place and have designated those locations, you don't revisit it unless and until you're gonna change them. Like, for example, with yours, if we suddenly realize, gee, that's now become such a popular event, it's gonna be every year for the foreseeable future, then we would want to amend the ordinance to add that as another common.
So we can have multiples?
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
They don't have to be
Okay.
congruent to each other?
Nope,
We could do that all with one resolution.
yeah.
And the other major change that they made, one of the reasons, while these have been around, for multiple years, is they used to have it. I mean, we had some areas like Riverside Park, which actually there was already an ordinance written to allow for like the Old Settlers baseball tournaments many years ago. But like specifically in our downtown, or if you like you're trying to incorporate Old Settlers Weekend, where you might have patrons go from, say, the Legion, over to Main Street type thing, and would want to consume in that area, is you had to have the streets blocked to be able to have the common consumption. Well, they've done away with that, so, I mean, it's still, you need to observe safety practices, but we don't have to formally anytime, like, keep the 200 block, for instance, if downtown was designated blocked at all times to allow for common consumption. You could, if there was an event that was sidewalk sales or something. And the other advantage beyond the beer garden is it does also allow for the licensed businesses. So normally it would be illegal for Peppers, to allow anyone to carry out that's not meets the law changes that were made during the pandemic. But this would actually allow them to essentially sell beyond their door. So
What if there was an event that we didn't want common consumption in that area? Could we,
Each
allow
event
it?
still has to be permitted,
Okay,
even though we,
so we could deny it for a certain event?
Yes.
Yes. You still have complete control. If you're looking at that and going, that's just gonna turn into a mess, you can say no.
Okay.
And, that's, again, well within the purview of what you do, and this doesn't impact that adversely. I think, leave some language in here, just as an example of what it used to be. Ethan was mentioning the change in the law, where, for safety's sake, if we deem it appropriate, to block off and barricade certain streets, so that you don't have an issue with someone getting out into a traffic way and it being a problem and us having some liability for that, we can still do that. So I have that there. It can be eliminated completely if you'd like, or you can go ahead and have it as a case by case. We are still going to require this, very much like a special use permit in certain circumstances. We're going to grant this to you, but you will observe the following additional requirements given the particular circumstances of this permit and what you're intending to do.
Another question, as you mentioned, it would, and you used Peppers as an example, to sell beyond the door. Does that mean that they have to have a venue outside, or to be selling outside, or are they gonna have patrons going in and get their consumable and go back out?
I believe they can have patrons go in, get their consumable, and as long as it's meeting
Within the standard of the
container.
designated
Okay.
area, yes.
Right, all right.
yeah, that's where it gets into, like, it has to be, there's some pretty, like, a lot of cities have adopted pretty much, like, it's gonna be in a container that's clearly marked that it's from
Yeah.
that business establishment, not, you just get to have a generic styrofoam container or a brown bag, and we don't know what's going on.
And where it came from.
And then, to Brad's point, I mean, this, again, was just a draft, and we can, if the council wants to look further into it, and this was just meant to be a discussion item tonight, really, like the hours of 9 to noon, 9 to midnight, every day, we can tweak that. You guys could say, we don't see a foreseeable reason why we'd want to allow this on Sunday. Or, I mean, you can set the hours according to what you would feel would be best for Halstead or for the typical event that might need a common consumption permit.
It also really solves a problem for those vendors who have a liquor license and do it for a living, like we were just talking about. If they're within the common consumption area, they don't have to go get that specialized permit any longer that gives them an alternative location from which to serve and sell. They can actually do so from their establishment into the common consumption area if they're in it. So it provides some expeditious ways for us to allow people to have an event and still control it without it becoming beyond the scope of what we intend.
Were you looking, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Would we want to connect Riverside all the way down Main Street to Third? I mean, is that something we would want to do? Just throwing that out there. Or do you want to separate just Riverside and downtown business district?
I think it
That's
depends
why
on
all
how
the
big.
blanks are on there.
I think it would depend on
You
like.
guys
No,
decide
yeah,
what
I'm
you
just
like.
throwing that stuff out there.
Yeah, I mean, at least what anecdotally, like, I've observed is during Old Settlers, you have that length of foot traffic and it's, I mean, right now, I know we probably,
Well, do you
blind
extend
eyes turned,
First Street east to the Legion? Because you
Yeah.
usually have all the food trucks along First Street.
yeah.
I think you would have to include the Legion in it as well.
Yep, you would.
It'd be smart to
Out-
do that too.
Exactly.
I mean, I think you could, definitely, I can't see it going any further north or south, excuse me, than Fourth Street, but depending on the event, the 300 block is
Yeah,
also
yeah.
closed. And it doesn't necessarily, I don't think, Brad can correct me if I'm wrong, but if there's individualized rules or the private property owners, don't want it on theirs, it would restrict it, so you can't necessarily just go park a chair on the post office lawn and consume if that's, it would be basically the public space.
And that's correct, and it's all in how we define it. There are a number of instances where local business owners, if you do a downtown area, are like, I don't want them walking in and out of my store in that circumstance, or I don't even want them sitting out front where I've got benches on private property. Well, we can define it only on the public right-of-way and public sidewalk, for example. So you really do have the ability to set that, and I'll take anything that you want to do, and if I think it's really, really broad, I will take it to the state and say, you're gonna give us problems over this. As I said, I had the one where they're like, well, take a shot. We want the whole city. And that did not work. It was a very summary, no. That's not what we're gonna do. So,
Well, I can see that it's an event-to-event decision,
and it is.
Right, exactly.
yeah.
But again, when you think of it from the perspective of, we can predict fairly closely, after a period of time, where these different events are gonna be occurring, what we typically do, where we host them. Those are the areas that you define. And then we take those, and you can expand them, contract them as you see fit, but we establish a standard that way.
So you're looking for consensus at this point is moving forward, or?
Yeah, whether you want us to move that forward, or, I mean, we can, again, there's other methods available if organizations or groups that would be doing events want to allow for public consumption. This just kind of allows flexibility and puts a permitting
Like you said, takes the
process
state
in
out.
place.
Takes the state out of the.
Yeah, because the downside, and I know we've had this with events in the past, and Julie can probably attest to it more of, when you go through the state permitting process, I mean, there's rigid timelines, and so sometimes in events, if they're not coming, 180 days before, it's hard for us to get them to meet state deadlines on those permits. And then they're mad at the city, but we're like, this is state ABC law, like, we don't necessarily have an issue with it, but the state wanted to see your plan 90 days ago and see background checks on every person, and so.
Well, let's go on the application for the street closures. That they pass out to all the business owners.
Yeah, we could add it basically as a request and then give them, it would be a separate application, but at least have them, tell us, like, are you planning or requesting that alcohol or C&B be allowed? If so, you need to fill out a common consumption permit.
And at the end of the day, no matter what areas we make common consumption, we still have the ability to control that via permit
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's probably a good
for
deal.
each event, so.
And we can add locations,
Yeah.
so.
At the end, as it's done by ordinance, I mean, you
Right.
guys you can grant it, and if the city were to run into any issues unforeseen or something, I mean, you just rescind the ordinance and the common consumption goes away, so.
Yeah.
It also follows the general spirit of everything else that we do. We can be more strident, generally they frown on us being less. So if we decided where, they're not gonna care if someone is walking around with glass containers and we're saying, that's not gonna happen, that's fine. We have the ability to do that and constrain, size of container. You can do a lot of things. I've seen those be 20, 30 pages of rules in some cities, depending on the problems they've had, so.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah,
So are
I
the
think it
smaller
is.
cities going towards?
Sedgwick, for example, has this, they put that pocket park in where that building was.
Oh, yeah.
That was a classic example of where it's just easy to do, because you've got constant, whether it's a little concert or it's some type of an event or it's a wedding reception, people want to be able to serve champagne or whatever. This just made it a lot simpler for them to go through the process than having to come way in advance, especially if it was alcohol related, and meet those standards and make sure that they got to the state in time, because invariably somebody would forget or they would miss the deadline.
So does this correlate with getting a license to sell alcohol downtown also?
Anyone that sells or that has, yeah, they would still have to go through the state requirement to be an approved vendor of whatever they're trying to sell, be it CMB or alcohol. So yeah, it just doesn't carte blanche say like without, a restaurant couldn't, if it located in the 200 block, and didn't have their own, appropriate licensure from the state, they couldn't just suddenly say like, oh, well, I'm selling alcohol under common consumption.
Yeah, but would this have anything to do with, as far as getting the application, to sell next to a church, or as far as what we already have been talking about earlier this year?
Some of the state laws, like Brad said, we can't be more strident. I think for, like in our downtown, it probably increases, the fact that we can say it is appropriately zoned or,
Well, didn't we already make it,
Yeah.
didn't we already make downtown an area to where they can't,
Yes.
so we don't have to go through that whole process every year?
Yeah, that's what I was talking
Yeah.
about, that one.
So yeah, so that,
Yeah.
we already have that ordinance, so that wouldn't,
Any other questions regarding common consumption areas, council? We can probably, when Brad puts that together, we can think about locations and where we should put those cutoff lines and propose them next time this comes up. We'll move on to our next item on the agenda, and that's animal control ordinance updates. We had a work session, was it last week? We had that, and we had pretty good dialogue as a council in there about some potential updates, and we probably need to run those by Brad. One of them that I can think of that was mentioned, Brad, was when an animal at large is hauled to Caring Hands, and we get it there and find out that it's not registered in the city of Halstead and it hasn't had its rabies vaccine, we need it by ordinance to say that that owner can't reclaim that animal until that registration's been taken care of. And then I don't know how to handle the rabies part of it because they don't give shots at Caring Hands.
They'll give a voucher so that you can go get your shot.
yeah, but you can't get registered until you have the rabies.
Right.
Yeah,
So it's,
so
yeah,
we gotta try to figure out how you make this work.
That's an interesting, okay.
We didn't really get into detail on that with the council. Do you give them bail for a couple hours to go get the dog vaccinated and registered, and then they can get them freed up? We're looking for some suggestions on how to make that work.
I do have a question for Chief Orem and Ethan and Brad, and I don't expect an answer right away. Being that we have go through changing police officers from time to time, we have new officers on board. Do you think that we need to have them go through some additional animal control training?
Is there anything like that available, Josh?
Or is it already being done?
They have specific animal control training that people who do animal control full-time will go to. That's a yearly certification that you would have to send every officer to. If you wanted that, which is 40 hours for every officer for that alone. At the same time, ultimately, there's no special, for what we do, it's not going to make a difference.
Yeah.
That training is for more along the lines of people who are gonna work for the ASPCA, that kind of thing. Us being able to pick a dog up and take it to caring hands, that training won't benefit us at all.
Do you guys have all the tools you need?
Yeah, the one thing we don't have that that we had many, many years ago that, I wouldn't recommend going back to would be a tranquilizer. That's the one thing we don't have. If we really need that, we have access to other agencies that do have it, that we can get assistance with. But short of that, I mean, we have catch poles. We just put them in our car, we transport them. Now, one thing that when we took animal control over, I was very upfront with is, I mean, you're not gonna see an officer on foot with all his gear chasing a dog for 6 blocks.
Right.
It's just not feasible for us. But anytime someone has a dog or it's friendly, it comes to us, yeah, we always pick those dogs up and take them. So there's no issue with the ability to collect and transport to county.
The other item that we talked about trying to clarify by ordinance, Brad, was in the event that animal at large has been picked up, and what is gonna constitute them being able to get their animal back from caring hands. And in the event that animal was involved in some sort of attack, how long do we hold the animal? Kind of the consensus that I got from the council was, can we design that ordinance where if that animal was involved in an attack and you have a victim and that victim's willing to come forward and testify against that animal, can we then hold that animal at caring hands until court?
Yes,
Even if it doesn't draw blood?
yes.
No.
You already can, and we had various examples of virtually all of these scenarios in court last time. And in each instance, might as well do the quick overview here. We have 3 elements to our animal control ordinance that generally are going to be operative. One is at large. And that can be everything from one time they slipped out, they got away from the kids, they got away from you, the leash broke, I don't care what it is. If they are not leashed and in outside, and that's even in your yard, with you and in control of that leash, they're at large. So that's one general category of offenses we deal with. The second one that people don't really realize a lot, that got used again the last time, is nuisance. And it's within that code, and it's actually in the same sections with at-large. In a nuisance environment, you can have an animal that gets out, some element of confrontation exists with a person or another animal, but they don't draw blood, there isn't really an attack, it doesn't rise level, and this is subjective to some extent, of menacing, but you're still nervous. I mean, you've got this dog in front of you blocking your way. In those instances, the officers have the discretion to charge it out as what amounts to a nuisance animal. And that's a big deal between that and the third category, which is the most extreme, dangerous or vicious, which is a separate article unto itself. Ours is written in the old style, old being it's been around a lot longer, that there is no one shot, there's no benefit of the doubt, there's no probation. If the animal attacks another animal or person, and it doesn't matter if they draw blood or not, it's basically if they attack in some fashion, and again, somewhat subjective, then in that instance, they're considered vicious. That then triggers the court's requirement to make a determination about forfeiture. Dog goes away, dog is sent out of the jurisdictional limits, dog is placed with a no-kill shelter, dog is placed with a shelter where they may put him down after 3 days. The one thing that prolongs their custody with the city is if they don't have a rabies vaccination that we can prove up and they broke the skin, there's an observation period. They're going to sit for 10. There are times where the owners then assume, well, if they show no symptoms and after 10 days, I should be able to go pick them up. That was the belief of one person last time in good faith based upon what they believed they were told. The city intervened through me and I said, no, the intent here is that the animal remains in custody until this case is resolved. And at this point, the case is still ongoing and a trial has been asked for. So the dogs stay there, or in order to work with Caring Hands in terms of limited space as well as the owner and the cost, I have told owners, in this instance as well, that if you can present a plan to the court, not just to me, but to the court, these animals will be rehomed, replaced in another jurisdiction away from here. They cannot come back into town for any reason or any purpose unless and until you're exonerated before the court in a trial. Then I'm willing to listen to that, because then you avoid that cost, because it adds up very quickly. You get $500 to $1,000 without blinking an eye. And if you have more than one animal, it's kind of breathtaking how quickly that happens. So those three categories exist, but then you get into all manner and types of things, such as, well, it's a service animal. That one is not going to be a defense, and based on how our ordinances are currently written. So if it's a service animal, it should be with you. If it's at large, it's not with you by definition. So the service that it's intended to provide isn't being administered, it isn't happening. So I am sympathetic, and I mean, we had people in here, pets like a family member, hyperventilating and not able to speak once they were told that the city was taking the position that you don't get the dog back. That was a shock for several. So, but that's kind of where we are. I can give you some additional examples in addition to what you discussed then of things that we can do that create more notice of forfeiture. One that we don't have in place is establishing a recidivist provision on at-large. If you have someone whose dog gets out within a 12-month period of time 6 times, 3 times, whatever term amount of times you want to use for frequency purposes, then the animal is going to be deemed to be recidivist. Very much like you get 3 speeding tickets within 12 months in the state, there are certain actions that are taken against your driver's license. Certain things could be set to occur and dictated in essence to even to the court that, okay, if we've had 3 at-large convictions, at this point the dog is removed as well. That depends on just how much you want to enforce that control over dogs in town. And it can be other animals as well, but that's the only one that we really deal with to this degree.
Well, and I think everybody probably agrees that the at-large part probably doesn't bother us as much as an at-large animal that's aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if it's a dog that runs up and licks your ankles, that's different than one that tries to chew your leg off.
Yep.
Well, I think the biggest failure that with the last incident was after the dog went in, after biting but not breaking the skin, Caring Hands never knew that dog was vicious. So I don't know if that's officer training or what, but we have to avoid that next time, because that was our biggest failure.
And you know that because you talked with them.
Yeah, I called them, talked to them for 30 minutes, and
Generally, yeah, it becomes the surrendering agency's obligation to notify them of why the animal's being placed.
Yeah.
Whether it's at large and we just don't know who the owner is, the dog isn't chipped, we don't have any idea, it's just running around town. It hasn't done anything to anybody, but it's out, and we don't allow them to just be out. Versus one that they picked up because it was, and again, doesn't have to even be an actual attack. Menacing is sufficient. If you have, you've got one that's baring its teeth and 6 inches away from your face, you're not necessarily going to be completely relaxed. And in those circumstances, that can be considered a dangerous or vicious animal, based upon the circumstances. And that's all in how the officer chooses to cite in that case. And once they do, then we need to make the agency that accepts the animal to house it during the pendency of all this aware, this is that type of a case.
Well, and I know there was one victim here in town that went through a series of rabies shots here a few months ago on a deal. But we do need to get something in there where if that dog's been hauled in and there's no registration, no rabies, the rabies vaccine and the registration needs to be taken care of before that person gets that dog back. And I'm not sure how we make that happen, but it needs to be a requirement. To me, it's common sense.
The other one that we do need to confirm, because it didn't happen here, but it happened in another city locally. Owner came in to pick up the animal. It was registered and it did have its rabies vaccination, but they couldn't pay the boarding cost. They let the dog go anyway and then billed the city. I'm not excited about that at all.
Right.
At that point, if we're gonna go ahead and turn the dog back over to someone who's already let it get out, in that case it was several times, why are the taxpayers picking up that tab?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'd agree.
So just several of those things that probably need to be a conversation we have. I think Caring Hands tries to do whatever they can to observe what the city wants, but they have to be made aware, and we have to also make sure we're clear on what it is our expectations are.
Agreed. Anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Well, I guess we'll kick that can down the road and have more conversations about it in the future.
I assume you want staff and Attorney Jans to work on those updates to the
Yes.
ACO
Yes.
sections and bring those back.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, that's going to complete our new business portion of the agenda. We do have one executive session on the docket tonight, and I would entertain the motion for that now.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the Halstead City Council recess into executive session to discuss confidential information related to a private company pursuant to, which one? This one?
Yep.
Pursuant to the confidential data relating to financial affairs or trade secrets of corporations, partnerships, trusts, and individual proprietorships, exception KSA 754319B4, and ask that in addition to the governing body, the following persons join the governing body in executive session: the city manager, the city attorney, and Beth Shelton. The open meeting and governing body to reconvene in the city council chambers at 8:30 p.m.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to enter into executive session. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We'll move back to the back council room. We are in executive session.
Seafood in Kansas, just, I grew up on the West Coast.
We are back from our executive session. Is there any action to be taken as a result of? Seeing no movement from the council, we'll move on to our next item, and we do have another executive session. This one's attorney-client privilege, and I would entertain the motion for that now.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the Halstead City Council recess into executive session to discuss contract negotiations pursuant to the consultation with an attorney on matters that would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship, exception KSA 754319B2, and ask that in addition to the governing body, the following persons join the governing body in executive session: the city manager and the city attorney. The open meeting and governing body to reconvene in the city council chambers at 8:50 PM.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to enter into executive session. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign. We are in executive session. We'll move to the back room, council. Mike's counsel. We are back from our executive session. Is there any action to be taken as a result of? Hearing nothing from the council, we'll move on. Next section of our agenda is the report section, and I'll start with governing body comments tonight. And tonight I'll start with you, Brody.
Nothing tonight.
Denise,
I have nothing tonight.
George,
Oh, life is good. Enjoying watching Main Street open up, or getting close to opening up. And, just enjoying my community, I really do.
Josh,
No, I don't have anything.
Derek,
I want to congratulate all the kids back to school and stay safe in the morning and after school. So that's it.
I'm pretty excited about Main Street getting close to being done. I drive down there and check on it almost every day, either in my truck or my golf cart, one of the two. The other thing I have noticed the last few days with a lot of mowing going on, people are still blowing a lot of grass out in the street. So that is against the ordinance. We need to try to keep that grass in our yards and just help everybody out, especially those that might be riding motorcycles, bicycles, and things like that. So we'll move on to our city manager for his manager report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not a whole lot for me this evening, just as we were getting finalized on the budget and some of the other activities that have eaten up my time that we discussed in other sessions this evening. So, unless there's any questions, that's really all I have for manager report of, we're working on getting all those projects buttoned up on the street projects, and then dealing with some of the issues, like we know we had a asphalt blowout on Chestnut that we need to get taken care of. And
Have dialogue been opened up with Vogue's partner on that? Okay.
so,
Council, any other questions of Ethan tonight before we conclude?
No?
All right, then I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for adjournment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you, council.